Hey everyone, welcome to Zone Defense. Be sure to follow us on Spotify at Zone Defense Podcast, on Twitter at Zone Defense Pod, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Zone Defense Podcast. And click that bell to get post notifications. Also, be sure to drop a comment down below and let us know what you think of this podcast and what you think of some of our picks. Today, it's just Roman and I again. Drew's still under the weather a little bit, so we're going to man the fort again this week. And after a very eventful week in the NFL with the whole COVID situation and everything, how's everything going with you, Roman?
It's good, Chris. Yeah, like you kind of said, we were a little lucky last week considering there was a bunch of games that were up in the air, but they ended up being played. We were treated with 2 Monday night games as well, so that was kind of nice. But before you say it, yes, you had a great week of picks, and you definitely extended your lead there.
Yeah, that was last week went really well for me. I mean, we didn't have very many differences. I guess we can go recap it just really quickly. Look at last week, just kind of. Don't mind the records at the bottom. Just we'll kind of look. I mean, everything was really similar between all of our picks, but I got lucky. I picked Minnesota, picked Philadelphia, so that really set us apart for sure. And that was it felt good. That's for sure as well. And then Roman also threw me a bone and picked picked the Lions to win as well. But I will say I did believe in them just for about a quarter there. So you weren't.
The first 5 minutes were going great.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, 14-0 about 5 minutes, and then just absolute disaster from there on out. Sounds very familiar for the Lions. I mean, at least they can't lose. They can't lose to the bye week this week, I don't think. So they'll keep their 1-3 record going into Week 6. But we got a lot of news to get into, so let's just get right into it right now. We'll start with some notable injuries. There wasn't quite as many injuries, but there was definitely a couple big names. I mean, the two highlighted a little bit more for fantasy than real life. I mean, they're very important to their real life team, but running back probably one of the more least important positions, I guess, more replaceable, I'd say. But Austin Eckler, first off, he has I believe a grade 2 hamstring strain. I believe in over a stream or something yesterday. I just saw this morning. He was gaming or something like that. He said like the hamstring just is like partially off the bone, which that sounds extremely painful. So expect him to miss a lot of time for sure on that. And then Nick Chubb as well, I believe, sprained his MCL. He's going to be out for a very long time, probably about 6 weeks for him. That's also a tough injury. And then O.J. Howard ruptured his Achilles, out for the season. Mike Evans looked worse. I have him in fantasy. This was a definitely very concerning injury for me at first. But it looks like a high ankle sprain, I believe, is the diagnosis for him. I expect him to probably miss this week, but I think he'll be fine after that. Noah Fant, pretty much the same story for him. I expect him to miss a week or two and be back with a high ankle sprain as well. And then Darnold with he got crushed on Thursday night game right on his shoulder, and I believe he's going to miss multiple weeks as well. And then on Monday night, I was watching this one live, and this is a season-ending Achilles injury for Damontae Kazee, too, the safety for the Falcons, which they're easily the most banged-up secondary in football right now. I believe they're down 6 corners, and then Kazee's one of their starting safeties as well. So that's brutal for them. But any of these you want to really get into?
I think it's kind of notable to say for Eckler and Chubb, at least, in terms of backups, they seem to be in a good position still. Obviously, Josh Kelly and Josh Jackson, I believe, and Justin Jackson in LA, and then Chubb, you have Kareem Hunt, obviously, who's going to be RB1 for the next few weeks for sure, and then you're going to have some underrated picks in Hilliard and D'Ernest Johnson. So those are definitely 2 teams that can afford a running back injury right now because they still have a few that can step up for sure.
I think the Chargers one is a bigger deal because I mean, Kelly he's fumbled back-to-back weeks. He really hasn't looked that great. I think Justin Jackson has an opportunity to take the lead role while he's gone, but I think this is going to be bigger for Justin Herbert. I mean, he was throwing to him so much, 9-10 times a game, man. I mean, it's a big deal to go down with. I mean, he's clearly their best offensive weapon, in my opinion. I mean, I know they got Keenan Allen, they got Hunter Henry, but Austin Eckler really makes this offense go. I think that's a big time injury for the offense. And I think he's also a great player, which neither Kelly or Justin Jackson are. So I think that one's a little bit bigger, but they should be able to manage at least. They have a good defense, and they still have pretty good weapons around Justin Herbert if he keeps the job, which Tyrod comes back. That's just absolutely clueless. But let's go ahead and get into some more like transactional news. GM/coach Bill O'Brien gets fired from the Houston Texans. I mean, they're off to an 0-4 start. I was not expecting him to be the first coach fired, but I did expect him to be fired this year. So, I mean, I think it's a good move by them, but it doesn't really matter at this point. he's tanked the franchise so bad. Miami's got both their first and second round picks after the Laramie Tunsil move last year. I don't really know where they go from here. Before we even get into the Dwayne Haskins stuff, what do you think about this move?
Yeah, he kind of had put a target on his back ever since he traded Hopkins away for basically nothing. Um, but the job will be, I think, somewhat enticing going into next season. Obviously, they're going to rock with Romeo Crennel as their interim right now. But in the offseason, they'll probably find a head coach and a GM separately. So it's kind of enticing when you think about they have Deshaun Watson, which is obviously a big piece of that offense. So there's a lot to work with, although they are very much limited in what they can do in the draft and probably with their cap space moving forward.
Yeah, this is also, I believe, the highest payroll team in the entire league.
Mhm.
I mean, they're pretty kept they're strapped for cash as well as they don't really have any draft capital. So I think it's going to be it stinks because Watson just got paid, but I really don't see them. I don't think they're going to be. I mean, you're looking extremely wrong with your prediction with the Texans from the start of this year, where you
I
thought
agree.
because I think it's not even just a this year thing. I think they're going to be. This is going to be one of the weaker teams in the AFC for years to come. Now, I was worried about it going into this year. Not even this worried. I'm more worried about it now than I was before. But I think it's going to be tough sledding for Houston. Hopefully, they need to start picking up some wins now to try to get into the playoffs this year. But I really am not expecting a whole lot for them.
Yeah, considering like obviously I was the one highest on the Texans going into this season, but I don't think that um, the Texans did better than what you were expecting. They did a lot worse than we all expected, honestly. So I
Right.
think I think that's a very big drop off that needed to be addressed. And like you said, they'll probably be struggling for the next few years.
Yeah, I this it's going to be tough for them for sure. But I mean, at least they do have Deshaun Watson to build around. Hopefully, maybe they hit with some later on draft picks and make a good signing or two. Maybe they can get back to the playoffs, but we'll see. Um, Other big news is that Dwayne Haskins, starter for the Washington football team, is now benched, actually demoted to third string quarterback behind Alex Smith, and Kyle Allen, former Carolina Panthers quarterback, with Ron Rivera, is getting the promotion here. And I believe the reasoning was that he fits this. I mean, he knows the system because he was with Rivera when they were in Carolina, and the schedule's starting to open up. I mean, they do play the Lions in a few weeks. That's a given win for the Washington football team. So it makes sense when they're trying to win games now. I know that they also played. I believe they smashed 2 games with the Giants in between that as well. So that's 3 matchups where they could definitely win. I mean, I don't hate the move personally. I don't think Haskins is that great, but they also haven't really given him much around him. I think it's better news for the weapons in Washington. Terry McLaurin for sure. I think he gets a bump in terms of fantasy. But I think he's going to get more production because he's a great receiver. He's the only target. He's the only target in town, pretty much. So I expect him to get a lot of work. But I think it's pretty much a lateral move. I don't think Kyle Allen's that much better. How do you feel about this move?
Yeah, there's definitely that familiarity there with him and Rivera, and I kind of want to go back to the beginning of the season because I said I wasn't very high on Haskins. I'm not high on any quarterback out of Ohio State in general, so I could have saw this coming. It would be really interesting to see Alex Smith get on the field eventually, but like you said, there are some winnable games coming up, so that could give him a boost of confidence for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, hopefully, maybe for their sake, they can start winning some games. But I mean, if Kyle Allen looks bad, and then even Alex Smith looks bad, then I mean, you could tell it's not Haskins' fault. But who knows? Maybe they may be drafting another Ohio State quarterback in the draft this year. We'll see. They're going to have a top pick, most likely. But let's get into some of the. This is since we're recording on a Wednesday. This is pretty much all the updated news we got. I mean, we got the Chiefs haven't had any more positive tests, but the Patriots had Stephon Gilmore, All Pro corner, test positive this morning, and he was seen after the game, kind of dapping up with Patrick Mahomes after the game. So that's definitely something to monitor is Mahomes' status going into this week, which it's definitely nerve wracking. But even if Mahomes doesn't have it, they may not even play the game because the Raiders also had an unidentified person on the team test positive as well. And they were at that event without the masks and stuff. So that's definitely concerning. I expect them to get even I believe they're already fined for it. I expect them to get even more fines for that, especially if there's games that can't be played. I don't think this is one that's it might get rescheduled, but I would not be surprised to see the Raiders get just handed the loss for this one because their protocol hasn't been up to the NFL standard. So we'll see about that for sure. But how do you feel about that to start before we get into Tennessee's news?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. They kind of got lucky to get that game in on a Monday night, but this is an all new case for them. It's going to be interesting to see what their tests come back in the next couple of days. And we've already seen, I don't know if you touched on it yet, but the Pittsburgh Tennessee game is now week 7, and Baltimore will get their buy-in um, on the weeks, or no, it's the opposite weeks. Baltimore will get their bye week 7. They'll play week 8, but we'll probably see a few more of those situations coming up. Maybe with this couple of games, Buffalo, Kansas City next week, that could impact that. Tennessee, Buffalo this week could possibly get postponed again. But it's just kind of tough, and obviously these teams should be, punished for the lack of awareness or lack of protocol, I guess, in their facilities.
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee, I didn't actually mention it, but they also had another positive test after having 2 days without any tests. So, I mean, you're seeing these kind of matriculate over the week. So this is getting even more concerning for these other teams that are starting to have. I mean, the Patriots now have their second positive test. So I believe that the New England Denver game is going to get postponed. That one for sure, I think, will be done. I think I'm going to go on a limb and say that the Raiders and Kansas City game plays, but I also do not think Buffalo, Tennessee is going to play. So maybe they rearrange some stuff where Buffalo and the smartest thing would be to just have Buffalo and Denver play, but I don't know how logistical that is when both these teams are supposed to be on the road. I don't know how they work that out. That wouldn't be a terrible idea, though, just to get a game in or whatever, but maybe they just both have their buys this week as well. So definitely concerning, though. Hopefully they can get this under control. Or, I mean, we may not have much to talk about if the NFL gets shut down as well. The NBA Finals basically being done right now, so it may not be much for us to talk about if the NFL gets shut down. But how do you think these 3 games are going to shake down this week?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Tennessee Buffalo didn't play. Obviously, if Mahomes even was around someone on the Chiefs who is positive, that's probably going to get shut down as well. And the last game, Denver and New England, possibly. Cam Newton will probably be out again because I think COVID IR is
Yeah,
maybe a couple weeks or so. So who knows for that game? We'll probably see Gilmore out. It's just an interesting situation to keep up with, and obviously it's Wednesday, so we don't know what the deal is. So we're gonna pick these games ahead of time, but if they don't play, then it just won't go against the score, and we'll readjust as we go along here.
yeah. I mean, I hope some of these games get played because the slate's going to start looking a little blurry if we're missing 3 games. And I was excited for. I mean, maybe not the Denver New England game, but definitely the other 2 for sure. Especially Buffalo Tennessee. That was going to be a really good game. But hopefully they can get it under control and maybe play that game. I'm not really expecting it, but who knows? But the next little news point in here, I actually didn't write in here. This must have been Roman that wrote it in there. But what is up with Foles? I can tell you that in one sentence for me, he's not a very good quarterback. That's what's up with Foles. I just don't think quarterback for the Chicago Bears replaced Mitchell Trubisky. Looked absolutely putrid against Indianapolis. Looked, I would say, even worse than Trubisky did this. I thought he played absolutely horrible this week. So, I mean, I think at some point we see Trubisky again after watching Foles. But, I mean, he's just not a very good quarterback. That's what it comes down to. He's a guy that's really he's like a bullpen pitcher. He comes in for a game or 2, maybe even 3, plays really well, and then it sucks because he's not actually a good quarterback. How do you feel about him, and what do you think is next for the Bears?
Yeah, this kind of goes right in hand with my point from last week where I said that, making the switch at halftime to Foles was a good idea and it paid off. But obviously, Foles is injury prone. He's not good in starts. He's more a better quarterback down the stretch. So I think it was too premature to go to that switch early.
Agreed.
Mitch should have definitely gotten the next couple of games. And if he still struggled, then you have Foles. But at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if we did see Trubisky down the line again, or even a few more switches. Like it'll probably be spontaneous. Who performs better that week will start. Um, it could give them a little edge to see make teams prepare for both quarterbacks instead of just one. But obviously, he did not look great, and I wouldn't be
No.
surprised if that he had that same performance on Thursday night.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a make or break game for his chances to keep the starting job over Trubisky. I would start Trubisky personally on Thursday night. I think he gives them the best chance to win this week, which honestly, to this point, I will say before we even get into the predictions, I don't know who I'm picking this game yet. I'm actually curious to see who you go with for sure. So that's going to be interesting, definitely with that. Definitely, and then getting into one of our last points here, it's the Cleveland Browns. Are they actually legit? I mean, they're 3-1 now. They just beat up. I know the score was closer, but basically Dallas played from they played garbage time football from about the first quarter on. I mean, they almost came back and got the job done, but Cleveland still took care of them, put up 49 points, which is absolutely absurd for a Cleveland Browns offense to do. I mean, I know they've been playing well the last few weeks, but who expected that? I mean, 3-1. I know they got blown out by Baltimore. They look like a completely different team. What do you think is the Browns' ceiling this year?
Oh yeah, they're definitely making the playoffs for sure. And this 3-1 start was definitely something that they needed, not only for us, to believe in them, but also for themselves to give them a boost of confidence. Baker's been playing well. He's definitely showing off he can have a bounce back season. Not putting up too big of stat lines though, but obviously doing enough to win games in a very convincing fashion as we saw last week. But I'm very impressed with them so far, and don't look now. They could probably contend for the division, but they'll make the playoffs for sure.
I mean, you look at the division. I mean, honestly, all four of these teams I think have impressed me in some. Maybe not. Honestly, the least impressive team compared to their standard is probably Baltimore. I haven't been overly impressed with them. They're still 3-1. They're still a really good team. Obviously, I've been impressed with Cincinnati as well. I mean, what they're 1-3 right now, but they've really, or no, 1-2-1. My apologies, it tied the Eagles, but they've definitely looked the part. I mean, they've kept it close. They did this a lot last year. They kept games close for all and then got blown out in the fourth quarter. This time, it's basically just been a one-score game, and they're a missed field goal away from going to overtime with the Chargers. I mean, they tied the Eagles. I mean, they could easily be 3-1 right now. So it's impressive to see that. And then obviously Pittsburgh has been good as well. They're undefeated. And then, like we already said, Cleveland 3-1. This is a good division. It's going to be really intense for years to come. I feel like any of these four teams are going to be competitors over the next 3 to 4 seasons. I think it's going to be really intense. But speaking of divisions, the NFC East, they're not so good. I mean, the took a absolutely commanding lead of the division at 1-2-1 with a great win against the backup quarterback. So clearly the Eagles are back. They're Super Bowl contenders now after such a dominating win. Now it's just this division's hot garbage. I mean, Washington is basically tied for the lead in the division with 1-3. I mean, they did beat the Eagles. The Cowboys, which I mean, they're 1-3. Their offense looks great. Their defense looks like I could put up 25 points against them. So who knows with them? And then the Giants are just the Giants. They honestly look even worse than the Jets right now. I think they could get the first overall pick this year and replace Daniel Jones if he keeps looking bad. So, what do you think about that? I mean, I know what you think about this division, but do you have any extra thoughts about it in general?
I wouldn't be surprised if the division winner was under 500, and
Me too.
they'll still get a home playoff game, which will be very controversial. Once again, we've only seen it a handful of times, but it usually gets the fans going in terms of just rank them in overall records and don't necessarily give division leaders a home game the first round. But um, I do expect Dallas to bounce back at least. I think they have the best talent on the roster. Um,
Agreed.
so even though they're third in the division currently, but they'll bounce back. They'll probably make the playoffs.
Yeah, there definitely won't be a second playoff team from. I mean, that goes without saying. The East isn't gonna have two playoff teams, and I feel like when you're talking about teams that are hovering around that 500 mark with the division winner and get that home playoff game, it's always the NFC East, man. This division has
Yeah,
been pretty bad for the last few years. I feel like, I mean, we saw it last year. The Eagles were, I mean, they were like 5-7 going in, and they ended up winning, I believe, 3 or 4 in a row to get the job done and get the division. But it wasn't anything I was overly impressed with. And I mean, there's been a lot of injuries within the division, especially with the Philadelphia Eagles. But that's not an excuse. I mean, they tied the Bengals, that's for one. And I mean, they haven't looked overly great. Carson Wentz looks like he's never thrown a football before in his life. He looked a little better against the 49ers, but the offense still didn't look great. You should have Alshon Jeffrey back soon, so maybe that'll help out a little bit. But I it's still a 2-horse race for me between Dallas and Philly, but it's basically first 1 to 7 wins gets the division, and I think Dallas will
yeah.
probably. I agree with you on that. Uh, since we don't have any more news, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be some more stuff that come out about the COVID scheduling. There's no doubt about it. I believe at least one of those games is going to get postponed. We're still going to pick them anyway, and we'll go ahead and jump into it right now. We'll start with the pick'ems. Uh, Thursday Night Football, like we kind of already talked about with the Nick Foles, Mitch Trubisky controversy that's still going on and will continue to go on after this game. We've got Chicago playing at home against Tampa Bay and Tom Brady coming off 5 touchdown performance. But, I mean, if you look at their weapons right now on offense, they're absolutely decimated. Yeah, I mean, Shady McCoy out right now with an ankle injury. Leonard Fournette also out with an ankle injury. And then to make matters worse, Mike Evans is out with an ankle injury. And then even look at Chris Godwin's got a hamstring problem. He's not going to play this week. Scotty Miller right now is still questionable. And then also their fourth receiver, Justin Watson, is questionable. And not to mention, we didn't even get to O.J. Howard not playing either. This is just an offense that is beyond banged up. I'll let you go ahead and start it. Do you think Tampa Bay still has the firepower to get the win in this one?
Yeah, I think so. It'll probably be a close game more than what people were expecting, and we kind of saw Tampa Bay win in a shootout against the Chargers on Sunday. That was a great game to watch between Brady and Herbert. And I do think the Chargers are a better team than Chicago, so I do think they'll be facing an easier opponent in that sense. And I'm going to go with Tampa Bay.
And I'm going to go with Chicago. I think after listing all those injuries, I think they're going to get the job done. I don't think it's going to be because of Nick Foles. But the Bears defense, they allowed, 19 points to the Colts last week. It was basically just all blankenship field goals. They kind of shut down Phillip Rivers with his limited weapons right now. I think they do a similar job with Tom Brady. I think the defense leads them to a very close victory in a game that I expect to be neither one of these teams to score over 20 points. But, obviously, I could be totally wrong on this. It seems like another similar pick when I took the Broncos over the years. But this is a better defense. They're a lot healthier on the defensive side of the football, and Tampa Bay is absolutely decimated with their offensive weapons. I'm going to go with the Bears in this one. I think this is a letdown game for the Buccaneers, and it's home too. So I'm going to go with Chicago in this one. But the next game, this is going to be a fun one. Carolina has actually impressed me this year. They're 2-2 now. Their defense looks a lot better than I thought. I thought this was going to be like a defense that you just start all your fantasy options against and forget about. They've actually been at least an average defense. They've been absolutely fine on the defensive side. And Teddy Bridgewater looked pretty good last week as well. They're going against the 0-4 Atlanta Falcons, who they have so many injuries in the secondary. Their receivers, like Tampa Bay, are also banged up. It's basically just the Matt Ryan to a bunch of guys I've never even heard of throwing the ball to. It's a disaster there in Atlanta. I'll start it off. As much as maybe if they're a little bit healthier, if Julio was healthy, I'd probably go with Atlanta, but I'm going to go with Carolina in this one. I think they get over the 500 mark, and I'm worried about Atlanta.
To go to your point, I do think that we over exaggerated the Carolina defense going into this season, and they've had some very impressive wins, kind of squeaking out against the Chargers, and then last week against the Cardinals, who I thought would bounce back, or Drake that would have a massive game as well, and they stopped him quite a bit. But I'm going to go with Atlanta. I think Ridley was held without a catch on Monday, and I don't think that happens again. And this is a get right game for Atlanta. I think they're going to win this.
Yeah, this one's definitely close to me. The fact that Julio's not playing definitely has me worried. I think Carolina, in a close matchup, is going to squeak this one out. Let's get into our next game, and this is a game that I really hope gets played because I think these are two very good football teams. I think Tennessee has overperformed a little bit and played some softer competition at 3-0 right now. Take on the 4-0 Buffalo Bills, which look absolutely dominant. I'll let you start this one off. I'm definitely excited for this match. It's home for Tennessee, so it gives them an advantage there, but it might not even be played. So go ahead and jump into your pick.
Yeah, it's going to be Buffalo. I don't really see much of a big competition, I guess, in this game. I think Tennessee, as I said last week, is one of the more frauds that are undefeated, and I think they're going to get exposed this game.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a good game. I think that the recipe for Tennessee to keep this close and possibly get the upset is to just give the ball to Derrick Henry 30 times and forget about it. Ryan Tannehill is a pretty good quarterback. Buffalo's defense hasn't looked all that spectacular, but they have shut down the run a little bit better this year than they have in years past while giving up a little bit more in the passing game. So it's definitely interesting to see if Buffalo's defense holds up against one of the best running backs in football. But the way Josh Allen's playing right now and the way Tennessee's defense looks very average to below average right now, I think Josh Allen's due for another big week like he's been doing all year. So I'll go with the Bills in this one as well. The next game, I'm excited to watch this one if it gets played. The Patrick Mahomes-led Chiefs keep rolling along 4-0. They ran into a little bit of struggles with the New England defense, which I kind of expected going into the game. It was kind of an ugly game for the offense, but they were able to get the job done in the second half and really break the game open. If Cam would have been playing for the Patriots, it probably would have been a different story. But the Raiders what's going on with them too? That's another team that I would be really worried about. I mean, they started off the year on fire. They beat the Saints in New Orleans. Oh no, never mind. That was in Vegas. Never mind. That's my bad. But they just lost and looked pretty bad against the Bills and Patriots in back-to-back weeks. I don't know what's up with them. It's a pretty easy pick for me. I don't think the Raiders have any chance of winning this game. I think this is gonna get ugly. I'm excited to watch it though. I'll see if the Raiders hang with them.
Yeah, I agree. Josh Jacobs has struggled the past couple of weeks, and I see the same thing. Um, it'll be interesting though to see if they actually play the game, regardless of, let's say, Mahomes gets COVID or not. Kind of like what they did with Cam Newton on Monday. So, if Mahomes doesn't play, that could be very interesting. But um, at full health, and with Andy Reid, I still think Kansas City gets it done.
Even if Kansas City has Matt Moore, they win this game by at least a touchdown. I mean, the weapons around him are just built for success. And honestly, the Chiefs' defense I've been more impressed with their defense than I have been their offense. I think their offense is still not hit their full stride besides in the Ravens game. I think they've looked kind of shaky in the other three matchups. But their defense has been absolutely incredible this year. I think they've been one of the better defensive units of football, and I don't think that changes at all this week. I think they get pressure on the quarterback. They force some turnovers. They make life tough for Derek Carr. So I'm definitely going with the Chiefs in this one. But next match we got here, and this is one I'd be very concerned with them not playing. But it's the Patriots without Cam Newton, without Stephon Gilmore, taking on the Broncos, which most likely are going to be without Drew Lock for one more week. It is. I think this game is going to be closer than a lot of other people do, just based on the fact that the quarterback play for New England was so awful last week against the Chiefs. I know it's a good defense, like I just said, but I don't think Denver is a horrible defense. So I think they're going to struggle to score a lot. I think that the recipe is give the ball to Damian Harris and forget about it. Looked good last week, had a lot of carries. They are missing Stephon Gilmore, so I think it's gonna be a tough fight. But I'll let you pick this one first.
Yeah, it hasn't been officially announced yet, but I guess we'll have to assume who starts for New England between Hoyer or Stidham. I think they have a better chance of winning with Stidham on the field because he looked pretty good in his one or two drives that he had at the end of the game. But like you kind of said, it was very surprising to see Denver last weekend on Thursday night against the Jets. That was a much higher scoring game than we anticipated. They are going against a way better defense, a better quarterback, and I do think New England will win.
Yeah, as much as the COVID cases, I mean, it's their two best players. I mean, Cam Newton and Stephon Gilmore, definitely their two best players getting it. Bill Belichick's two. He could play. He could throw me and you out there and replace those two, and they'd still beat the Broncos. They're not losing to this team, no chance. And so the next matchup we got to in Week 5 is a matchup I'm worried about the Jets actually winning because how bad the Cardinals have looked the last 2 weeks on offense. I mean, the Cardinals, they're traveling, playing on that turf in MetLife. I mean, it's been a problem for a lot of other teams. This is a week where I'm worried about Arizona. I think they get decimated with injuries early on in this game. I'm still going to pick them, but it's not a really confident pick for me. I know they're a much better team, but I mean, they do have to travel to New York for this one. And I mean, like I said before, the turf's going to stink, and they haven't been playing good football offensively. I think they do make some adjustments to get the job done. I think this is going to be a closer game than other people do.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, MetLife isn't nice to anyone in terms of staying healthy, but you kind of have to look at the playmakers on each side of the ball. The Jets barely have any. Arizona has quite a few. They've let down though the past couple of games, but you would have to assume that they plan ahead and get it done this week. Kenyon Drake, and I'll mention him really quickly. It's a get right game for him. You kind of seen this past couple of games against prime opportunities to explode out. Detroit and then Carolina didn't do anything. But if this is the last straw for Kenyon Drake in this game, he should have a good game. But if not, then in terms of fantasy purposes, I just trade him as soon
Yeah,
as you can.
yeah, I'd probably be looking to move him before this matchup. I mean, if he doesn't perform in this one, you're probably going to get about the value you got for him a couple of years ago in fantasy, where he was just like a backup running back for you that you could throw in a bye week. But I'm getting worried about him, and I'm worried about this offense not throwing the ball down the field as much, and they're just looking to DeAndre Hopkins on every play, which worked out for the first couple weeks. But defense is starting to figure out that literally Kyler's first read every time is DeAndre Hopkins, and it's not been working as much. I think they need to start spreading the ball. But I think Cliff Kingsbury is a really good coach. I know he hasn't won a lot of games. I think he's a good offensive mind at least. So I think they'll get things right. And I could see this being a bounce back game as well. Hopefully they don't suffer any major injuries though. But next matchup, and this is the battle for Pennsylvania. I'm excited for this one. Philadelphia traveling a whopping, I think it's a couple hundred miles, maybe even 100 miles to Pittsburgh to play the Steelers. And this is going to be, I think it's going to be a fun game to watch. I'm really excited for this one. Um, I've always kind of had a soft spot for Philadelphia, so I think they're going to keep this game close. But it's your turn to pick. I'll let you go first.
Yeah, Philadelphia needed a desperate win against San Francisco, and they looked, somewhat impressive because San Francisco is still, pretty decent in terms of what they have on the field, regardless of their injuries as well. But, Pittsburgh, obviously on an emergency bye week, and they've had a long time to prepare for this team at home. This should be Pittsburgh's game to win.
Yeah, I would be more. I actually would probably pick Philadelphia if it wasn't for Pittsburgh being on the bye week and Philly's still really banged up. I think this is going to be a good game though. I'm excited to watch this one for sure. I feel like every time they match up, which it's not super common, obviously, but when they do match up, these are usually fun games to watch. So I'm excited for this one. It's going to be a treat, I think. But next matchup we got here is the Los Angeles Rams, which besides, I mean, week one, week two, they looked very impressive. Week three, I mean, the offense stunk in the first half, and then the defense was awful in the first half, and they kind of picked it up in the second half, I guess. We're able to almost get the win against the Bills. Besides that PI call, it was a little bit controversial for sure. But they're traveling to Washington to play the Washington football team with Kyle Allen at the helm. Who do you think is going to win this game?
I have the Rams defense, and I'm very excited about that. Before I officially make the pick, though, I kind of want to mention that at the end of last week, the Rams Giants, it was a much closer game than we expected. I thought it would be a much game handled better by the Rams, but McVay said that the Giants defense was hard to prepare for, and I guess he was right. But at the end of the game, Jalen Ramsey, Golden Tate got into a flout brawl. We're not going to go into the details of why, but if we could see repercussions for Jalen Ramsey, a fine, maybe a suspension, that could probably affect them this game. Regardless, though, I think the Rams are going to win pretty handily.
And I actually do think this one's going to be a little bit closer. I didn't think the Rams looked overly impressive last week at all. They couldn't run the ball. They couldn't. They were having troubles doing anything on offense against the Giants, which I will say their defense, the Giants' defense looked a little bit better than I thought to start the year. They haven't been getting absolutely boat raced every game, but they're still not a great defense. Washington, I believe, is actually a pretty good defense especially with their defensive line. I don't know what the status of Chase Young is for next week, or this week. If he plays, I think it's going to be a little bit closer than people think. I would pick Washington to cover the spread in this one. It's probably somewhere around the 9 to 10 point in terms of them being given 10 points. So I think I would pick Washington to cover the spread, but I'm definitely going with the Rams in the overall pick 'em there. But next matchup here is going to be a fun one as well. I'm excited to see this Baltimore defense take on Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. He's looked incredible. I really can't say enough about how good he's been. 1-2-1 Bengals could easily be 3-1. I really think that he's going to have a decent game in this one, even though they're going to make his life pretty tough. I think Joe Mixon got it going last week. I see a similar recipe. I think they're going to keep this one close as well, like they've been doing all year. I know Baltimore is good. They haven't been overly impressive. Cincinnati's defense, another defense that hasn't been quite as bad as I thought they would be. I know they struggle against the run a little bit against the Browns, but other than that, they've been at least a little bit below average, better than I thought. So I think it's going to be a better game. But what do you think about this one?
Yeah, besides the first two picks, we've all been in agreement since, and I think there's a couple more upset potential games coming up. But like you said, this is Baltimore's game. I do think it'll be a very entertaining game, obviously, with Burrow and Lamar Jackson, their first matchups of many. But I'm excited to see how this one shakes out. But I do think Baltimore is going to win.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one to watch for sure. Next game, this one's a battle of two teams that I don't think are very good. I mean, the AFC South, pretty much both must wins for both these teams. The 1-3 Jacksonville Jaguars travel to Houston. The 0-4 Houston Texans. Now Bill O'Brien less, but still have Deshaun Watson and co. I mean, I'll let you take it away. What do you think is going to happen in this one? I think this is an interesting game.
I think so too. It'll probably be another close game. I'm gonna have to agree with Drew though in terms of who I want to win. I think it'll be Houston. Um, when you're gonna get a new interim head coach, you kind of have a new re-urgency of that team, reinforcement of energy. I believe so. They're gonna want to play for their interim Romeo Crennel and get a win for him. I think, and they desperately need it too.
As much as I want to pick Jacksonville, I agree. I think Houston at home makes a big difference for me as well. If this one was in Jacksonville, I would pick the Jags to win. I think it's going to be a really good game, like you said. I think Gardner. I would not be surprised if we all get this one wrong. This seems like
Hmm.
Arizona pick from last week to me. I think Jacksonville has a very good chance to win this game as well. It's pretty close for me, but I'll go with Houston for basically the reason you said, as well as them being the home team in the matchup. Another game. This one I'm a little bit less excited to watch just because it doesn't look like we're going to get Tua in week 5. We got the Miami Dolphins taking on the San Francisco 49ers, which their defense still looks very formidable. Miami didn't look great last week against a crappy Seattle Seahawks defense. I'll take the Niners in this one without a lot of talking about it. I don't think this is going to be that good of a game to watch, but I mean it's football, so I'll watch it. So, but we'll see. Maybe Tua gets in there at some point and makes it a little more interesting. Jimmy G might be back too, so there's that for us.
Yeah, if Jimmy G is back, they're gonna win for sure. Although I think they're gonna rock with either probably Beathard, I think, because Mullins was not good enough to win that game last week. I will go with San Francisco as well, but obviously this is probably one of those Fitz magic games where he could probably go off just randomly, and we could probably get this one wrong again as well. But this should be a
Definitely.
game for San Francisco to win.
Yeah, that's. I mean, you're not wrong. It's definitely a possibility. San Fran should win the game, but I wouldn't say it's absolutely for sure that they'll win. But we'll go into our next game. And this is one that I'm extremely excited to watch. In the 4 o'clock slate, the late afternoon games, we got Indianapolis traveling to Cleveland for an absolute. This is one I'm extremely excited about. Both these teams look horrible in week 1. Since then, both 3-0, beating some good teams. I think this is going to be an absolutely great game. I'll let you take it away for this one as well. I want to see who you go with because we say Drew, go with Cleveland here. I think that's an interesting pick.
Yeah, I agree with him as well. They're definitely really hot right now, and they can score as many points as they want. And I think they have a defense who can probably overpower Philip Rivers this week. And I don't know if we touched on it yet, but Darius Leonard might have went out with an injury in the middle of last game. I'm not really sure what the
Yeah,
updates on him are, but I do think Cleveland will win at home. I kind of hope you go for Indy so we can split this game because I do think it'll be quite close.
and that's exactly what I'm going to do here. I'm picking the Indianapolis Colts to win this game. I think, like you said, I mean, these teams are they're almost carbon copies of each other, to be honest. They don't ask their quarterbacks to do much. They rely on the running game. I mean, Nick Chubb goes down with the injury. Kareem Hunt's not any worse than him as a runner, so that's not a big drop off. But I think Indianapolis has a slightly better defense. I mean, they just basically suffocated the Bears last week, and they just allowed them to do absolutely nothing. I think this is going to be an ugly game. I think it's going to be low scoring. I don't think Cleveland's going to get a lot of points, but I think it's going to be one of the better games of the week. I think this is going to be, like I said, not super high scoring already, but I think it's going to be extremely intense, a lot of running, and it's basically just going to be what doesn't beat themselves. But 3-1 matchup, you can't. This is one of my. I think this is easily the game I'm most excited for the week. Very, very excited to see who wins this game. I think it's basically a pick 'em between the two teams. But now a game that I'm not as excited for. Another, I believe they get the primetime slate over Indianapolis on CBS in the 4 o'clock hour. It's the New York Giants traveling to the Dallas Cowboys. I'm not even going to waste your time talking about the Giants. They're terrible. I know Dallas's defense sucks, but they're still going to win the game, and there isn't much else to it for me.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm going to point out one quick note. I do think it'll be a little bit more higher scoring than we anticipate, considering Dallas defense has not been
Yeah,
great. There's not many fantasy football options, viable options on the Giants, but I do think if you have one, you might want to start them because they could possibly pan out, considering there's an opportunity for points and scoring. But other than that, I will go with Dallas, and we'll all be in agreement on that.
yeah, that's pretty straightforward for me. I agree that it'll probably be a high scoring game just because both defenses are great, especially Dallas. They've looked putrid on the defensive side, but their offense is way too good. They'll win the game for sure. A game that it's I think Minnesota's a better team than their 1-3 record shows, but they go into Seattle, they travel there for Sunday Night Football. This is I would say one of the better games of the week, but it's not the strongest slate we've had. I like last week's games a lot better than this week's. So I'll let you start this one off. But Seattle at home, they've been playing great football, undefeated. Who do you think's going to win this one?
Yeah, before I make my pick, I just want to let you know for reference, Minnesota went to Seattle last season for a primetime game, and that was quite close. They ended up losing by a touchdown, although
Uh,
Russell Wilson did look not as sharp. But I do think that will change, and I do think Seattle will win this game more convincingly. The Vikings, they had a good win last week against, obviously the winless Houston Texans, but they're going into a different house, a different team. It should be another game they lose.
yeah, I mean, hey, you and Drew aren't going to be. You're going to have a hard time making up ground if you don't start picking some of these upsets. But I'm going with Seattle as well. Pretty chalk pick for me here. I'm trying to keep my lead in the standings up by 4 games on Drew, up 6 on Roman. We got one more game on the slate. It's Chargers traveling to New Orleans in a game that I'm pretty excited for on Monday Night Football. I don't really know why the Saints keep playing on Monday night, but they may be joined by one of these other matchups that could eat. I mean, they may be playing with the Chiefs again on Monday night. Who knows if the Chiefs games ends up getting played? I mean, it could be moved to Monday or whatever because of the Raiders' positive test. We'll see on that. I'll start it off. I'm going with the same pick as Drew here. As much as I do like the Chargers, the Eckler injury hurts a lot. I think they need him a lot in this matchup against a ferocious Saints defense. I'm going to go with the Saints.
Yeah, I really want to pick the Chargers here because New Orleans. The game against Detroit was a game that they should not have won versus any other team. They were just lucky to come back, and obviously it's Detroit, so we're all gonna have our fun with that, saying that it blew another lead. I get that, but I do think New Orleans wins this week. Hopefully, they have more weapons or a few of their injured players come back, and this should be a game they win at home fairly convincingly. Although it could be another shootout like last week.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be I think this is going to be a pretty good game. I'm excited to watch Herbert in prime time. I'll definitely be tuning into that. We do have one more game on the slate. It's the Detroit Lions taking on the bye week. Obviously, picking the bye week here. This is a team that can't get the job done. So, who are you going to go with in that matchup?
No comment.
Jeez. All right. Let's go ahead and get into the fantasy picks. I mean, obviously, I'm going to go undefeated in this slate again. I'm riding hot in that. I'll let you go over your starts of the week from last week before we get into our picks for this week.
Yeah, it was quite a down week for both of us, actually. Mine was Goff, didn't perform as well.
Oof.
It shocked a lot of people too, because I think we all expected the Rams to win very convincingly, and but they didn't, oddly enough. So that was a very weird pick that didn't pan out for me. And then Tyler Lockett, off a great week versus
Oof.
the Cowboys, did not live up to that expectation against Miami, and what was a very close game for most of that time.
Yeah, Lockett didn't catch a pass until I believe halfway through the third quarter, and after I saw that, man, I was like, Roman, tough week for you, man. Especially coming off the 31-point week, you're throwing in a must-start guy, and he bottomed out. But that's just the name of the game in fantasy football. These players, they're really unpredictable. You can't. I mean, we have no control over the outcome. Obviously, we're just trying to give people good starts for. I mean, whatever situation it is, whether it's an injury taking place or good matchup or just the player, maybe needs to bounce back or something like that. I went with Devontae Parker in this one in a good matchup against the Seattle Seahawks. In the other side of that matchup, he had a very good game, 10 for 110. So I'll say that one was definitely a win. But the guy I tried to predict the bounce back for was the Carolina Panthers. I believe still their number one receiver, DJ Moore, who was very disappointing last week, only had 4 receptions for 46 yards. I started him in my week, and I started him over guys like Terry McLaurin and DJ Chark, which was an absolute mistake and was the reason I am now 3-1. So, I mean, you can see these picks hurt us as well. It really stinks. But let's try to bounce back this week. I'll let you go with your first guy first.
Yeah, I was gonna say one player first, but I'm gonna save him until the end so I can buy my time and maybe fight my conscience on that one. So my first pick is gonna be Darius Slayton, a wide receiver for the Giants. I kind of said beforehand, if you have a Giants player like Slayton, start him because it'll probably be a good game for him. Um, I do think it's a very high scoring game, maybe like in the 30s at least. And considering what the Giants have done this season, that's very high scoring for them. I do think most of that is going to go to Slayton. Obviously, I have Devontae Freeman, who the past couple weeks have been progressively getting more integrated into the offense. But ultimately, Slayton is Daniel Jones' guy, and with no Byron Jones and a weak defense, I do think Slayton has the opportunity to score a lot of points.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Slayton was a pretty good play as well last week. He kind of disappointed. but it kind of makes me a little more confident for him this week in a weird way. I think he had that big blow up week one. He's been very quiet since. I think he's due for a pretty good game here. I expect him to score a touchdown in this one against one of the softest defense they'll play all year. So Slayton, I think, is a really strong flex play for the week. I'll get to my first pick. It's I'm staying in division. I'm riding the Flames. I'm going with Antonio Gibson in this one. He had a big week 4 against the tough defense in the Baltimore Ravens. It's his third straight week with a touchdown. Last week he had over 40 yards and a touchdown, but this is the first week he finally got involved in the passing game. He had 4 receptions on 5 targets. He had over 80 yards. Most was on a big play, but still the 5 targets, 4 receptions. It's really promising to see. The Rams have been really struggling against running backs all year. They've been allowing a lot of pass catching work to the running back position. I mean, like we just said, Devontae Freeman, he didn't have a great fantasy game, but he had like 5 or 6 receptions in that game. I mean, they're allowing a lot of dump offs. Kyle Allen's taken over the offense. He was captain check down with he loved to throw the ball Christian McCaffrey. I mean, and they've compared Antonio Gibson to CMC. He's not him, but he has a similar skill set, I would say. So I think he's going to have a pretty good game. He's an RB2 for me. I don't know how you feel about him, but I'm definitely willing to put him in the lineup.
Yeah, in this matchup, I believe the offense will run through Gibson, and even though he's going up against a great defense, it could be limited. But if they do score, it'll probably be because of him. So it's a boom or
Right.
bust for me. But I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, there's always the chance with a rookie like him that he doesn't score that touchdown. But he's had three weeks in a row with one. He's getting a majority of the work now. I'm confident that he's going to have it. He's going to put up some pretty decent numbers. I think he's going to give you at least in a full PPR. I think he's going to give you at least 13 points. So a guy that I definitely want to get into my lineup. I'll go ahead and double up with my picks. I'm going to ride another guy. This guy's had some down weeks the last few. Honestly, the whole season so far. I'm expecting a big week for Hollywood Brown this week against the Cincinnati Bengals. Kind of mediocre pass defense. I know they've been okay, but it's because their run defense is so bad. Their pass defense gets hidden a little bit, shadowed by that. I think it's going to be a little closer game than other people do. I don't think it's going to be an absolute blowout. I think Hollywood gets in the end zone with a long touchdown this week. I mean, he's kind of struggled, but he had a lot of targets last week. Week 1, he had a good week as well, over 100 yards, and he smashed a couple mediocre performances in between that. So I think he's really due for a big matchup. If he doesn't get the job done this one, it's going to be hard trusting him from here on out. But I think he's a good flex play and a very similar tier to Darius Slayton this week for me.
Yeah, I agree. And in terms of that Baltimore-Cincinnati game, there's a lot of underrated wide receivers you could possibly slot in as a flex, between Hollywood Brown or T. Higgins or Boyd. Those are all decent options. And I do think, Hollywood will be the most, productive out of those 3. Obviously, when you're going to win, you have to spread the ball around. And, it's very inconsistent in terms of where the points come from for Baltimore, whether it's going to be Lamar running it the whole time or is he going to attack through the air. But if you drafted Hollywood Brown, you kind of have to depend on him for where decently early he was drafted at. So I do think he'll pan out this week.
I'll let you go ahead and get into your pick now, and then you can mention the other guy you were thinking of as well.
Yeah, so I have 2 that I came up with. Obviously, one of them drafted very, very high. You gotta pay a premium for him. Has not been great so far, but I assume that he has to go off against the Jets. It's Kenyon Drake. I mean, come on. It's very frustrating for sure. I understand the hate for him at this point, but the Cardinals have to do something about that. You can't just not win games if you're not getting Kenyon Drake the ball. And obviously, there's a prime Jets game to turn it around. And obviously, this is my last straw for him. I said that earlier. It's the last straw. And if he doesn't do anything remotely good, I'm gonna trade him.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, Kenyon Drake has been a massive disappointment. I know what they could do to fix their problems with, the offense and stuff. Is start getting the ball to Chase Edmonds more because I don't think Drake looks that impressive. I think he's looked a little bit slow. I think that precautionary walking boot that he was in before the season was more than just a precaution. I think he just doesn't look the same this year. I don't know what it is, but he doesn't look like he's getting downhill or to the outside as fast or as hard. I think it's going to be if he doesn't get it done this week, I don't know when you're going to start him. He's a flex for me this week. I'm very worried about him, but he could always have that Joe Mixon game where he puts up 2 or 3 touchdowns and then everyone forgets about the rest of the season. But I would say even if he does go off, you try to sell him high, man. I'm worried about him. I'm worried about Chase Edmonds taking over the lead role at some point. So I'll let you mention your other guy that you would like to say before we close out the episode, though.
Yeah, it's David Johnson. I do think he had off a mediocre week last week. I do think he has a better matchup against the Jacksonville team. We saw Miles Gaskin go off against Jacksonville a few weeks ago. I expect the same thing for DJ. And although there's no offensive production right now for Houston, I do think one way they can get a win, their first win, is to run the ball with Johnson. I do think he has a good game, better than Drake probably. I don't know. We'll see.
I'm most likely playing both of them against both of them this week, so I hope you perform very similarly to you did last week, because I don't really want to lose this week. It's a big matchup for me. But I guess since you named a third guy, I'll go ahead and throw out another name for me as well. It's another receiver, a guy that you got to stay in the flames with. Over 100 yards in back-to-back weeks now. He takes on the mediocre to bad Seattle Seahawks defense. It's Justin Jefferson for me, man. He's looked the part for sure. I mean, he's honestly looked better than Adam Thielen so far this year, and I think he's going to take over the number one role at some point. He's slot right into Steph Diggs' role and done an admirable job with it. He's going to keep getting a bigger role. If he gets into the end zone again this week, he could easily be a top 10 receiver like he was a couple weeks ago, or a top 5 receiver even like he was a couple weeks ago. I expect him to get over 80 yards and a touchdown in this one. How do you feel about Justin Jefferson?
Yeah, I don't say this often to you, but that's a great pick. I do think he kind of has that Metcalf ability where he's not going into a great matchup, but he'll still end up with a touchdown or two. We kind of saw it with Metcalf and Gilmore last week, a couple of weeks ago. And Justin Jefferson has been performing very well, and I do think he'll overtake Thielen by the end of the year. If he's on waivers, pick him up or try and trade low for him, I guess. But if you have him, you're gonna be lucky that you have him.
Yeah, I think if you have him, you're holding, because I think the ceiling is the sky for him. I think he could easily be a wide receiver 2 for you every week from here on out. And I think in this matchup, he could even finish as a wide receiver 1. I think it's going to be a really good matchup for him. Before we end the episode, I'm just going to criticize what you said about me. You not liking my picks very much. I have won 6 more games than you overall on the season in terms of our pick'em. So I think you need to respect that.
Yeah, we're a quarter into the season, so I'm not really too concerned of where I'm sitting, but there's always room for improvement, and I gotta give props to you for that, at least for being ahead.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah, and that pretty much wraps this one up. I mean, hopefully everything goes smoothly this week with all the the COVID scares possibly in the NFL. Hopefully at least a couple of those games get played. If all 3 do, that would be a miracle too. But at least hopefully some of them do. But again, we're the Zone Defense Podcast. Subscribe to us at YouTube, follow us on Spotify and Twitter, and then search us up at Apple Podcasts at Zone Defense Pod. Anywhere else you listen to podcasts as well, we're on there at this point. And thank you for listening to this one. We'll see you next time. Peace.
See ya.